When I was a child, I used to lie on the grass at night and stare upward, not because someone told me to, but because something in the darkness seemed to be staring back. That feeling, ancient, wordless, half terror and half wonder, is perhaps the most honest thing a human being has ever felt. The sky is not empty. We have always known this, somewhere beneath our reason. And yet, for centuries, we have been told to wait, to be patient, to keep the question alive but never expect the answer. Now, for the first time in the history of our species, we may not have to wait much longer. That is not a promise. I want to be careful with promises when the universe is involved, but it is a probability. And probabilities, when they are grounded in evidence and driven by the engines of science, deserve to be taken seriously. We live in an era when the detection of molecules associated with life on a world 120 light years away is no longer a fantasy. It is a published paper, debated at conferences, examined under the cold light of peer review. We live in an era when telescopes the size of tennis courts float above our atmosphere and parse the chemistry of alien skies. Something has changed. The question is no longer whether life exists elsewhere in this cosmos. The question is whether we will be the generation, your generation, my generation, that finally finds it. I think we might be. But let me explain why. That answer is far more complicated and far more profound than it first appears. There is a version of this question that people imagine is simple. We build bigger telescopes. We listen harder. We send probes farther. And eventually one afternoon, someone picks up a signal or a photograph or a chemical signature, and the headline reads, "We are not alone." And the world changes overnight. That picture is not wrong, but it is dangerously incomplete. Because before we can find alien life, we must first understand why finding it has taken us this long. And the answer to that is not a failure of technology. It is a failure of imagination about scale. The observable universe contains more than 2 trillion galaxies. Each galaxy holds, on average, hundreds of billions of stars. Around most of those stars we now know orbit planets. The number of worlds in the cosmos is so large that if you tried to count them one per second from the beginning of the universe to right now, you would not have reached a fraction of the total. In a universe this vast, the idea that life arose only once, only here, only on this small, warm rock orbiting an ordinary star near the edge of an unremarkable galaxy is not humility. It is a kind of accidental arrogance, a failure to apply our own logic to the full scale of what exists. 1. The cosmos does not traffic in exceptions, it traffics in patterns. Let me take you through what we actually know and what it implies. We now understand that the chemistry of life, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, the amino acids that build proteins, the nucleotides that carry genetic information, is not special to Earth. These molecules are scattered across the galaxy. They have been found in comets, in interstellar clouds, in the atmospheres of gas giants, in meteorites that crashed into ancient deserts. The raw ingredients are everywhere. And wherever we have found raw ingredients on Earth, however brutal, however extreme, the conditions we have found life using them. Hydrothermal vents at the ocean floor where sunlight never reaches, acidic hot springs, frozen Antarctic lakes sealed under kilometers of ice. Life, it turns out, is not fragile. Life is tenacious in a way that borders on aggressive. This is the first movement. From chemistry to biology, the distance is shorter than we thought. Not guaranteed, but short. The second movement concerns time. Life on Earth appeared remarkably quickly, geologically speaking, almost immediately after conditions allowed for liquid water. 4 billion years ago, within a few 100 million years of Earth's formation, something was already metabolizing, already replicating. That speed is informative. It suggests that, given the right conditions, life does not require a miracle. It requires an opportunity. And across 2 trillion galaxies, opportunities are not scarce. The third movement is the one that should change how you feel when you look up at night. In the last decade, we have confirmed the existence of more than 5,000 planets beyond our solar system. Among them, dozens sit in what we call the habitable zone, the orbital range where liquid water could exist on the surface. But here's what we have learned that most people have not yet absorbed. Liquid water may not require a habitable zone at all. Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, carries more liquid water beneath its icy crust than all of Earth's oceans combined. It has never seen sunlight. It does not need to. The tidal forces of Jupiter heat it from within. And if there is warm, chemically rich liquid water under that ice, and if the logic of Earth's deep sea vents applies, then Europa alone may harbor life right now, in our own solar system, a 40-minute light signal away. The fourth movement is the one that demands humility. We have been searching for life that communicates like us, that builds technology like us, that broadcasts radio waves like us, but that is a very particular kind of life. The search for microbial life, for chemical biosignatures, for metabolic byproducts in alien atmospheres, that search is already underway, and it requires no assumption that life out there looks anything like us. It requires only that life, like fire, leaves traces, that it consumes something and produces something, that it alters its environment in detectable ways. The James Webb Space Telescope is already reading the atmospheres of distant worlds. It is looking for oxygen, methane, water vapor, the fingerprints of biology. That search is not hypothetical. It is operational. It is happening now, this year, as these words reach you. I anticipate the objection. You may be thinking, we have been here before. Decades of promises. Mars canals that turned out to be geological illusions, SETI signals that turned out to be interference, the wow signal that was never repeated, the face on Mars, a long history of hope meeting disappointment. Why should this time be different? It is a fair challenge, and I will not dismiss it. But I want to ask you to notice something. Every previous disappointment came from looking in one place, in one way, at one kind of signal. The paradigm was narrow. The tools were limited. The science was incomplete. What has changed is not optimism, it is infrastructure. We have now moved from searching speculatively to searching systematically. We can detect the presence of phosphine in the atmosphere of Venus and publish the paper in Nature Astronomy. We can taste the plumes of Enceladus, where Saturn's moon sprays its interior ocean into space. We can read the chemical diary of a world that has never been visited. These are not promises, they are instruments. And instruments, unlike hopes, improve. There is something deeper here, though. Something that, if we slow down long enough to feel it, changes the shape of the question entirely. If we find life, even microbial, even ancient, even dead, we will have learned the most important fact in the history of science, that life is not an accident confined to one corner of one galaxy. We will have learned that the universe is, in some meaningful sense, alive. That the process which began here in the warm chemistry of early Earth is a cosmic process. That we are not a fluke, that we are an expression of something the universe does when conditions allow. That does not make us less significant. It makes us more. Because it means that consciousness, the ability to look up and wonder, to build instruments and ask questions, to feel awe in the face of darkness, is something the universe has been trying to produce somewhere. Perhaps on a world with 2 moons and a violet sky, something else is lying in the grass, looking up and asking the same question. And the courage required to take that seriously, to live in the full dimension of that possibility, is not naive. It is, I would argue, the beginning of wisdom. The universe is 13.8 billion years old. It will endure for trillions more. We are alive right now, in the brief century when our telescopes first became powerful enough to read alien skies. We are alive in the moment when the question transforms from philosophy to science. If that does not make you want to stay curious, if that does not make you want to keep asking, keep learning, keep looking up, then perhaps you have not yet felt the full weight of what it means to be here, on this pale blue dot, at this particular moment. This is what Sagan's archive is for. Not for people who want easy answers, for people who understand that the right questions are enough.